And I think that's European identity, is people who know the price of hatred and who decide to renounce it. And England, who fought bravely during the Second World War, who played an important role in preserving democracy and freedom in the world, has never had that moment.
Hello, Robin. Thank you very much for being our guest today. And I would like to start by asking if you could introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Hi, well, I'm Robin. I'm 28 years old. I was born from a British mother, so I'm British, but I grew up in France and I still live in Paris. I work in politics.
How would you describe your relationship with Brexit? Could you maybe share one of your anecdotes with regards to it?
When I grew up, I often went to my mother's friends in Britain or in parts of the family, and we often went to England, somewhere close to London. And growing up, I always had this strange feeling about Europe. Why? Because when I went to Italy, where I also have family, when I went to other European countries, I always saw little European flags on the number plates, on the buildings, everywhere. And the only place I didn't see them was in Britain. And I always remember people were always being very harsh on the European Union, something that you couldn't really hear somewhere else. And then in 2014, I remember watching the TV and there was this picture of snow and fire. It was the Maidan Plaza in Ukraine. And people were fighting because they didn't want their regime to go closer to Russia. They wanted to be closer to Europe. There was this very strange scene where you saw people fighting and sometimes dying with European flags in their hand while they weren't part of the European Union. And that's the point when I realized the same year I went to England and I really realized that some people were ready to fight for that, and that in England, there was just a completely different feeling. And when you see a country that's not part of the European Union, that maybe will never have a greater attachment to Europe than a country that was maybe amongst the first ones to join, you realize that there's a problem. And that's really when I felt that it would never, Britain, or at least England, would probably never be European, or at least not in the same sense that other countries were.
And keeping this historical perspective, what would you say is your best anecdote with regards to the European Union's evolution?
Well, I don't know if it's an anecdote, but Europe was built by and for losers. It was built by countries that were ravaged by war after the Second World War, countries that survived the camps, countries that were completely destroyed, countries, and that was just after the Second World War, who knew the price of nationalism, of hatred. And later on, Europe was also joined by a second wave of countries in the south that went through military dictatorship and sometimes civil war, countries in the east that came out from communist dictatorships, from Stasi and from labor camps. And all these countries know the price of nationalism. They know the price of not having democracy, of not having freedom, of not having basic human rights. And that's why they join Europe. And that's what we are trying to build together.
How would you describe your perception of this European identity in France and the UK, where you've lived, and whether you think it has changed throughout time?
The best image of what Europe means, at least from a European perspective, is this incredible picture and video that you can still find online. In 1979, there was the first elected president of the European Parliament that had been elected by European citizens. The vote for the presidency was very hard, but in the end, the German delegation, the West German delegation, as a bloc, decided to support this new president of the European Parliament. The woman who took the stage and who was just elected was Simone Weil. She was a survivor of the concentration camps. She survived horrible things at the hands of Nazi Germany. And at the border city of Strasbourg, that for a very long time marked the disputed border between two world powers that together caused two world wars, she delivered a speech of unity and of hope. And it's one of the best symbols in world politics, in my idea of peace and what humanity can achieve. And I think that's European identity, is people who know the price of hatred and who decide to renounce it. And England, who fought bravely during the Second World War, who played an important role in preserving democracy and freedom in the world, has never had that moment. And I think that's the major difference. I mean, they will never feel how we feel in that moment because they never went through the same things we did.
And now that you've talked about history and we've talked about the past, and you've brought the element of hope. And I would like to ask you now on the European Union's future. What do you think are the post-Brexit EU's main strengths and weaknesses?
A French historian in the 19th century said that the difference between Germany and France was that in Germany, national identity was blood and iron, to quote von Moltke, while in France, identity was an everyday's plebiscite. What he meant was that being French was a choice of every day, and that is the same as what I believe Europe has become. Europe is a choice. That's both a strength and a weakness. It's a weakness because you can leave. That's part of freedom. You can vote tomorrow to leave, and any country can do it. It is also a strength. Choice is a strength because it's freedom. And it's because European Union is built on choice that people still want to join. And that is our greatest strength.
I'm glad that you emphasize this, element of choice as a strength for building a stronger and better European Union in the future. So I would like to conclude by asking you to what would you say to other Europeans? What would be your message to our audience?
Well, to Europeans in general, I'd say if you don't agree with the idea of a stronger, more united, more integrated Europe, ready to fight for the values I was describing, it's fine. I respect that. I respectfully disagree, but I respect that. And it is your choice and your freedom. However, if you believe that Europe can be more than it is now, if you believe it can be stronger and through strength protect the environment, protect human rights, protect women's rights, protect minority rights, if you believe that Europe can be a force for good and a beacon for what humanity can achieve, then you have to fight for it because no one else will do it for you. And that means that you have to join a union, you can join a political party, or you can join a great youth European organization. But whatever you do, I mean, if you believe these things are worth fighting for, you have to do it because literally no one else is going to. And this is not something we can be sure it will work. I mean, Europe is not guaranteed. It's a choice. And if we don't make that choice, it might not survive.
Thank you very much, Robin. That is the end of our interview, but I would really like to thank you for bringing this historical perspective to the analysis of this post-Brexit Europe and what it means to you, and especially emphasize this identity and the choice of being part of this project for building better for all of us. So yeah, thank you very much once again.
It was a pleasure.